The Time Papa Got Lost. Part E. Tom shook his head. Isn't it silly to start building a cabin when Uncle Mark will be riding in here in a few days? He asked. That is impossible, Papa said. That cloudburst washed away all our tracks. No, it didn't, Tom said. I knew when we turned off the logging camp road that we might get lost. I used rocks to make markers that wouldn't wash away, and I cut markers on trees no cloudburst could destroy. That is why I was lagging behind all the time. If my calculations are correct, Uncle Mark should be riding in here in 2 or 3 days if we just stay here. You didn't think my great brain would let us get lost, did you, Papa? Papa and Swin stared at Tom, bug-eyed for a moment, and then they both began to smile happily. Papa got off the boulder and patted Tom on the shoulder. I'm proud of you, son, he said. It was foolish of me to try and find a shortcut out of these mountains without marking our trail. Then Papa had a second thought about what he had just said. He staggered back to the boulder and sat down. He covered his face with his hands as if he were going to cry. What's the matter of him? Swin whispered. I don't know, Tom answered. Suppose we find out? Tom walked up close to Papa. What is the matter? He asked. I told you we were going to be saved. Papa raised his head up. I'll never live this down, he cried as if being tortured. Your mother will never forgive me for trying to take a shortcut and endangering all our lives. And I can just hear people in town bringing up the subject every time some neighbor's cow wanders away. I'll be the butt of jokes for years. Then Papa got real dramatic and held his arms out in a hopeless gesture. That is the only answer, he cried. I'll stay right here. Better to live out my life in this wilderness than to go back and have people point me out as the town fool. You boys return with your Uncle Mark. I'm staying right here. Tom stared at Papa for a moment as his great brain began to click. Then he looked at Swin. Did you see me mark the trail? He asked. Swin looked surprised for a second and then smiled. No, he answered. Tom looked at me and winked. Did you see me mark the trail, J.D.? No, I lied. Well, Tom said with a shake of his head, I sure don't remember marking our trail, and that leaves only Papa. The look of despair on Papa's face gave way to one of hope. He looked as though he might enjoy the comfort of home more than living alone in the wilderness. Thank you, boys, he said. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I figured Tom would have liked it better to be thanked from the bottom of Papa's purse, but didn't say anything. We lived for 2.5 days on small game we caught in our deadfalls, fish we caught and roasted pine nuts. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Uncle Mark rode into our camp on his white stallion, leading 2 pack horses. I was never so glad to see anybody in my life, but Papa folded his arms on his chest and looked positively angry. What in the name of Jupiter took you so long, he demanded, leaving me all this time trying to keep up the spirits of the boys. I didn't know what spirits Papa was talking about. He sure hadn't kept up my spirits with that story of the man lost for 5 years in the mountains. Uncle Mark grinned as he dismounted. Then he looked at Papa. If you just stayed in one place after you knew you were lost, he said, instead of wandering up and down one blind canyon after another, I would have caught up with you a few days ago. It is a good thing you had sense enough to mark your trail, or I would never have found you. What kind of tenderfoot do you think I am? Papa asked, as if insulted. You certainly don't think for a moment that I'd try to take a shortcut out of these mountains without marking my trail, do you? Uncle Tom turned sideways so Papa couldn't see him wink at Tom. Of course not, he said. But you really gave me a scare when I saw the wrecked buckboard and the dead horse. It is a good thing you didn't let anybody ride in the buckboard when you tried to bypass that waterfall. They might have been killed if you had. Papa must have forgotten his wild leap from the buckboard. I certainly wouldn't do a fool thing like that, he said. Gosh, Teedy, I whispered to Tom, Papa's lying like all get out. Would you rather him tell a few little white lies or have everybody in Aidenville think he was a fool? Tom asked. But your great brain saved us, and Papa is taking all the credit, I protested. I know, and you know, and Swin knows, and Uncle Mark knows I marked the trail, Tom said. But that is as far as it will ever go. We aren't even going to tell Mama. I thought about it for a moment and knew Tom was right. It would be bad enough for everybody in Aidenville to think Papa a fool, but letting Mama know she had married one would certainly break her heart.